Catherine walked slowly through the quiet corridors of Windsor Castle, her footsteps echoing softly against the ancient stone walls. The morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting gentle shadows across the ornate tapestries that had witnessed centuries of royal history. She paused at one of the windows, gazing out at the sprawling gardens where her children often played during their visits. The past months had been particularly challenging for the royal family. Catherine's recent health struggles had tested everyone's strength, but especially her own. The chemotherapy treatments had taken their toll, leaving her feeling fragile in ways she had never experienced before. Yet through it all, she had maintained the grace and dignity that the public had come to expect from their beloved Princess of Wales. King Charles had been a constant source of support throughout her journey. Despite his own health challenges, he had made it his priority to ensure Catherine felt loved and supported by the entire royal family. Their relationship had always been warm, but during these difficult times, it had deepened into something truly special. He saw her not just as his daughter-in-law, but as a cherished member of the family who deserved every bit of care and attention they could provide. On this particular morning, Catherine had received an unusual invitation. A handwritten note from King Charles had arrived with her breakfast tray, written in his distinctive careful handwriting. The message was simple but intriguing. "My dear Catherine, would you join me in the blue drawing room at 11 o'clock this morning? I have something rather special I would like to share with you. With all my love, Charles." As she made her way toward the appointed meeting place, Catherine reflected on how much her life had changed since marrying into the royal family. She remembered the nervous young woman who had first walked these halls, uncertain about her place in such an ancient institution. Now, years later, she felt a deep connection to the history and traditions that surrounded her, even as she worked to bring her own modern perspective to royal duties. The blue drawing room was one of Catherine's favorite spaces in the castle. Its elegant decor and intimate atmosphere made it perfect for family gatherings and quiet conversations. As she approached the ornate doors, she could hear muffled voices inside. Her curiosity grew stronger with each step. When she entered the room, she found King Charles standing near the fireplace, a warm smile spreading across his face as he saw her. He was dressed casually for a royal standard, in a comfortable tweed jacket and perfectly pressed trousers. But what caught Catherine's attention immediately was the excited gleam in his eyes, the same look she had seen when he was particularly pleased about something involving his grandchildren. "Catherine, my dear, thank you for coming," he said, crossing the room to embrace her gently. His embrace was careful and tender, mindful of her recent treatments, but filled with genuine affection. "I hope you're feeling well today." "Much better, thank you," Catherine replied, settling into one of the comfortable armchairs he gestured toward. "Your note has me quite curious. You seem rather excited about something." Charles chuckled, a sound that filled the room with warmth. "I suppose I am rather transparent when I'm pleased about something. Yes, I am excited, but first, how are the children? And William?" They spent several minutes catching up on family matters. Catherine shared stories about George's latest school achievements, Charlotte's newfound interest in horse riding, and little Louis's amusing attempts to help with household tasks during their recent family time. Charles listened intently, asking questions and sharing his own observations about his grandchildren's development. "They'd been such a source of strength for me," Catherine admitted, her voice soft with emotion. "During the difficult days, thinking about them and their future gives me purpose. They need their mother to be strong, and that motivates me more than anything else." "And they have the most wonderful mother," Charles said firmly. "Catherine, I want you to know how proud I am of the grace and strength you've shown throughout this challenging time. The way you've handled everything, maintained your duties where possible, and still been such a devoted mother and wife, it's truly remarkable." Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes. "Thank you. That means more to me than you know. There have been moments when I've questioned whether I'm doing enough, whether I'm letting everyone down." "Never," Charles said emphatically. "If anything, you've shown everyone, including my grandchildren, what true courage looks like. You faced this challenge with such dignity, and I believe it will make you an even stronger future queen." The conversation continued for a while longer, touching on Catherine's gradual return to royal duties, her plans for upcoming engagements, and her hopes for the family's future. Charles listened carefully to everything she shared, offering encouragement and wisdom drawn from his own decades of royal experience. Finally, as their teacups grew empty and the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, Charles stood up with a mysterious smile. "Now, my dear Catherine, the reason I asked you here today is because I have something for you. Something I hope will serve as a symbol of how much you mean to this family and to me personally." Catherine watched as he walked over to a side table where an elegant wooden box sat, partially concealed by a silk cloth. The box itself was beautiful, made from what appeared to be polished mahogany with intricate silver hinges and a crest embossed on the lid. "Before I show you what's inside," Charles continued, returning to sit across from her but keeping the box carefully in his hands, "I want you to understand the thought that went into this. I've been planning this for quite some time, even before your recent health challenges. But recent events have only reinforced my conviction that this is exactly the right thing to do." He paused, looking directly into Catherine's eyes with an expression of deep sincerity. "You have brought such joy and stability to William's life, and, through him, to our entire family. You've embraced your role with such natural grace, and you've given us 3 absolutely wonderful grandchildren who are the light of my life. More than that, you've shown a genuine commitment to the causes and charities that matter to our family's mission." Catherine felt her heart beating faster with anticipation. The weight of Charles's words, combined with the obvious care he had put into whatever surprise awaited her, created an atmosphere of profound emotion in the room. "I've watched you grow into your role as Princess of Wales," Charles continued, "and I've seen how naturally you connect with people from all walks of life. Whether you're visiting a children's hospital, supporting environmental causes, or simply engaging with members of the public during official visits, you have a gift for making people feel seen and valued. That's not something that can be taught, it's something that comes from the heart." As he spoke, Catherine reflected on her own journey within the royal family. She thought about the early days when every public appearance felt like a test, when she worried constantly about making mistakes or disappointing people. Over the years, she had found her confidence and discovered causes that truly resonated with her personal values and interests. "The truth is," Charles said, his voice growing more emotional, "you've exceeded every expectation anyone could have had. You've not only supported William beautifully, but you've become a true asset to the monarchy in your own right. And, during these recent difficult months, watching how you've handled everything with such courage and grace, well, it's only reinforced my belief that you're exactly the person this family and this institution needed." The room fell quiet except for the gentle ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. Catherine could feel the weight of the moment, understanding that whatever was in that box represented more than just a gift. It was a symbol of acceptance, appreciation, and love from the man who would one day pass the crown to her husband. "I know these past months have been incredibly challenging," Charles said softly, "and I want you to know that your strength hasn't gone unnoticed. Not by me, not by William, not by the children, and certainly not by the people of this country who have been following your journey with such concern and admiration." Catherine nodded, too moved to speak immediately. The kindness in Charles's voice, combined with the obvious thought and care he had put into this moment, touched her deeply. She realized that this conversation, regardless of what gift might follow, was itself a precious treasure, a moment of connection and understanding between two people who had found their way to a genuine familial bond despite the unique circumstances that had brought them together. "Now," Charles said, standing again and moving closer to her chair, "I think it's time you saw what I've been so excited to share with you." With trembling hands, Charles carefully lifted the silk cloth covering the wooden box. As the fabric fell away, Catherine could see intricate engravings on the lid depicting intertwined roses and thistles, symbols of England and Scotland united. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly the work of master artisans who had spent considerable time perfecting every detail. "This box itself has a story," Charles began, running his fingers gently over the carved surface. "It was made by the same craftsman who created some of the most precious pieces in the royal collection. I commissioned it specifically for this purpose, and they understood that whatever it would contain needed a worthy home." Catherine leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on the beautiful container. She could see now that the engravings were even more detailed than she had first realized. Among the roses and thistles were small symbols that seemed to tell a story of their own, heraldic elements that she recognized from various royal crests, but arranged in a pattern that seemed somehow personal and unique. "The symbols you see here," Charles continued, noticing her interest in the engravings, represent not just the traditional elements of royal heraldry, but also aspects of your own journey and contributions to our family. The craftsman and I worked together to create something that would be uniquely meaningful to you. He pointed to a small engraved section near one corner of the lid. This here represents your work with early childhood development, a cause that has become so close to your heart. And this, he indicated another area, symbolizes your dedication to mental health awareness. These aren't just charitable interests to you, they become genuine passions that you pursue with real commitment and knowledge. Catherine felt her eyes filling with tears as she realized the depth of thought that had gone into even this beautiful container. It wasn't simply an expensive box, it was a work of art that told the story of her life and contributions as a member of the royal family. But, as beautiful as this box is, Charles said with a gentle smile, it's what's inside that I'm most eager to share with you. He paused for a moment, looking at Catherine with an expression that mixed excitement with something deeper: affection, pride, and genuine love for the woman his son had chosen to spend his life with. Slowly, carefully, Charles opened the lid of the box. As it lifted, Catherine gasped audibly. Nestled inside, cushioned by the finest ivory silk, was the most extraordinary piece of jewelry she had ever seen. It was a tiara, but unlike any other in the royal collection. The design was breathtakingly elegant, incorporating elements both traditional and modern in a way that seemed to speak directly to Catherine's own style and personality. The base of the tiara was crafted from platinum, formed into delicate flowing lines that suggested both strength and grace. Set into this precious metal foundation were dozens of diamonds of various sizes, each one carefully chosen and placed to create patterns of light that seemed to dance even in the gentle morning illumination of the drawing room. But what made this piece truly extraordinary were the larger stones that served as focal points throughout the design. "Catherine," Charles said softly, his voice filled with emotion, "I'd like you to meet your new tiara. But this isn't just any tiara. Every significant stone in this piece has been chosen from existing pieces in the royal collection, each one with its own history and significance." Catherine's hand moved involuntarily toward the stunning piece, then stopped, as if she was afraid to touch something so precious. "Charles, I don't know what to say. It's absolutely beautiful." "The largest stone here," Charles continued, pointing to a magnificent sapphire that anchored the center of the design, came from a brooch that belonged to Queen Victoria. She wore it frequently during the later years of her reign, and it was said to be one of her favorite pieces. "I thought it fitting that it should now become part of something worn by another future queen who, like Victoria, has shown such dedication to duty and family." Catherine stared at the sapphire, marveling at its deep blue color and the way it seemed to capture and reflect the light. To think that this stone had once adorned Queen Victoria, one of the most influential monarchs in British history, and now it would become part of her own story, felt almost overwhelming. "And these emeralds," Charles indicated several smaller but equally beautiful stones positioned throughout the tiara, were part of a necklace that belonged to Queen Mary. She was known for her impeccable taste in jewelry and her understanding of how important these pieces are not just as ornaments, but as symbols of continuity and tradition. As Charles spoke about each stone and its history, Catherine began to understand that this wasn't simply a gift, it was a deliberate act of inclusion and acceptance into the deepest traditions of the royal family. Each precious stone represented a connection to the women who had come before her, who had worn the crown and carried the responsibilities that would one day be hers. "The pearls you see woven throughout the design," Charles continued, "these came from various pieces that have been in the collection for generations. Pearls have always been associated with wisdom and integrity, qualities that I see in you every day." Catherine finally reached out and gently touched the edge of the tiara, marveling at the smoothness of the metal and the way the stones seemed to come alive under her fingers. "I'm overwhelmed," she whispered. "The thought, the history, the beauty of it all, it's more than I could have ever imagined." "There's more," Charles said with a smile. "The design itself tells a story. If you look carefully at the overall pattern, you'll see that it incorporates elements from the Spencer family tiara that you wore on your wedding day. The craftsman studied photographs and created subtle echoes of those design elements in this new piece." Catherine looked more closely and could indeed see the connections Charles was describing. The flowing lines and the way certain stones were positioned did remind her of her family's tiara, the one that had connected her to her own heritage on the most important day of her life. I wanted you to have something that honored both your own family history and your place in the royal family, Charles explained. This tiara is meant to be a bridge between who you were when you joined us and who you've become as a member of our family. The emotional weight of this gesture was almost too much for Catherine to process. She had always been moved by Charles's kindness and acceptance, but this gift represented something far beyond generous. It was a symbol of belonging, of recognition, and of the deep affection that had grown between them over the years. When did you begin planning this? Catherine asked, her voice still filled with wonder as she continued to examine the exquisite details of the tiara. The initial idea came to me about 2 years ago, Charles admitted. I was watching you at a state dinner, and I was struck by how naturally you carried yourself, how easily you connected with the other guests. You wore your grandmother-in-law's earrings that night, and I thought about how meaningful it is when jewelry carries history and personal connections. He settled back into his chair, clearly enjoying the opportunity to share the story behind this extraordinary gift. I began speaking with the royal jewelers about the possibility of creating something new but incorporating elements from existing pieces. The more we discussed it, the more excited I became about the project. The design process took nearly a year, Charles continued. I wanted to be involved in every decision, to ensure that the final piece would truly reflect who you are and what you mean to our family. The jewelers were incredibly patient with my requests and suggestions. Catherine shook her head in amazement. I can't believe you kept this secret for so long. And, during everything that's happened recently, especially during recent months, Charles interrupted gently, working on this project gave me hope and something positive to focus on. When you were going through your treatments, I would meet with the craftsman and think about how wonderful it would be to see you wearing this when you were feeling strong again. The room fell quiet as both of them contemplated the significance of that statement. Charles had found comfort in creating something beautiful for Catherine during her most difficult times, while she had been fighting her own battle with courage and determination. I need to tell you something else about this tiara, Charles said, his voice taking on an even more serious tone. This isn't just a gift for you to wear on special occasions. I'm officially adding this piece to the royal collection, and it will be documented as the Catherine tiara in all official records. Catherine looked up sharply, surprised by this announcement. Having a piece of jewelry officially named after her and added to the permanent royal collection was an honor usually reserved for queens, not princesses of Wales. Charles, I don't know if I deserve such an honor, Catherine stammered. You absolutely deserve it, Charles replied firmly. And, more than that, I believe future generations will look back on this tiara and remember not just its beauty, but what it represents about your contributions to the monarchy and to our family. As Catherine continued to gaze at the stunning tiara, she began to see not just a piece of jewelry, but a symbol of her journey, her struggles, her triumphs, and her place in a tradition that stretched back centuries. Each stone told a story, and now her own story was becoming permanently woven into that narrative. Charles carefully lifted the tiara from its silk-lined resting place, holding it with the reverence one might reserve for a priceless artifact from an ancient civilization. The diamonds caught the light streaming through the tall windows, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the walls of the blue drawing room. Catherine watched, mesmerized, as the piece seemed to come alive in his hands. Would you like to try it on? Charles asked gently, his eyes twinkling with the excitement of a child sharing a treasured secret. I've been imagining this moment for months, wondering how it would look and how you would feel wearing it for the first time. Catherine's hand instinctively went to her hair, which she had styled simply that morning, not knowing she would be trying on one of the most beautiful pieces of jewelry she had ever seen. I'm not sure I'm properly dressed for such a magnificent piece, she said with a nervous laugh. Nonsense, Charles replied warmly. Beauty like yours doesn't require special preparation. Besides, I think there's something rather perfect about this moment being so natural and unposed. This is how I'll always remember it, you, in your comfortable clothes, in this room where we've had so many wonderful family conversations. With careful hands, Catherine lifted her hair slightly as Charles approached. The weight of the tiara was substantial but perfectly balanced, and, as it settled onto her head, she could feel the coolness of the metal against her skin. The sensation was different from any other piece of jewelry she had worn. There was a gravitas to it, a sense of connection to something much larger than herself. Charles stepped back to admire the effect, and his face broke into a smile so radiant that Catherine couldn't help but smile in return. "Perfect," he said softly. "Absolutely perfect. It's as if it was always meant to be yours." Catherine moved toward the ornate mirror that hung above the fireplace, eager to see herself wearing this extraordinary creation. As her reflection came into view, she gasped softly. The woman looking back at her appeared transformed not just by the stunning jewelry, but by something deeper. There was a regal quality to her posture, a confidence in her expression that seemed to have emerged from somewhere within. "I look different," she said wonderingly, turning her head slightly to see how the light played across the various stones. "I look like a future queen," Charles finished for her, his voice filled with pride and affection. "Because that's exactly what you are, and this tiara simply helps the rest of the world see what I've known for years." Catherine studied her reflection more carefully, taking in the way the sapphires brought out the blue in her eyes, how the diamonds seemed to add light to her complexion, and how the overall design complemented the shape of her face and the line of her neck. The craftsmanship was so exquisite that the piece seemed to have been designed specifically for her features. "The proportions are perfect," she observed, gently touching one of the delicate platinum curves. "How did they manage to create something so suited to me without ever having me try it on?" Charles chuckled, clearly pleased that she had noticed this detail. "That wasn't entirely by chance, I'm afraid. I may have enlisted some help from William in that regard. He provided the jewelers with very detailed photographs and measurements, though I swore him to secrecy about the project itself." "William knew about this?" Catherine asked, surprised. "He knew I was having something special made for you, but I didn't reveal the exact nature of the piece until just last week," Charles explained. "I wanted him to see it before today, to ensure he approved of my choice." His reaction was quite similar to yours, actually. He was speechless for several minutes. Catherine felt a warm glow at the thought of William seeing this tiara and knowing it was destined for her. Their partnership in all things had been one of the greatest joys of her life, and knowing that he had been part of bringing this moment to fruition made it even more special. "What did he say when you finally showed him?" she asked, still gazing at her reflection and marveling at the transformation. "He said it was the most beautiful piece he had ever seen, and that his father had impeccable taste," Charles replied with obvious satisfaction. "But, more than that, he said it captured something essential about who you are: elegant, timeless, but with a warmth and accessibility that makes people feel welcome in your presence." Catherine turned away from the mirror to face Charles directly, the tiara adding inches to her height and somehow making her movements more graceful and deliberate. "I don't know how to thank you for this. It's not just the gift itself, though it's absolutely breathtaking. It's what it represents, the thought behind it, the way you've made me feel so truly part of this family." "My dear Catherine," Charles said, his own eyes growing moist with emotion, "you don't need to thank me. If anything, I should be thanking you. You've brought such happiness to my son, such joy to my grandchildren, and such grace to the institution we're all dedicated to serving. This tiara is simply my way of recognizing what you've already given to all of us." They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, both understanding the profound significance of what had just transpired. This wasn't merely the presentation of an expensive gift, it was a ceremony of acceptance, recognition, and love between two people who had found their way to a deep familial bond. "There's something else I want to share with you about this piece," Charles said eventually, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I've had documents prepared that detail the provenance of every stone, every design element, every historical connection. This will become part of the official royal collection records, but I also want you to have your own copy." He walked over to a desk in the corner of the room and retrieved a leather-bound folder, ornately decorated and clearly created specifically for this purpose. This contains photographs of the tiara being made, sketches of the original design concepts, and the complete history of each precious stone that's been incorporated into the piece. Catherine accepted the folder with reverent hands, understanding that this documentation would allow her to share the story of the tiara with her children and grandchildren someday. "This is incredible, Charles. The level of detail, the care you've taken with every aspect of this. I wanted you to have the complete story," he explained. "Someday, when you're much older and, perhaps telling your granddaughter about this tiara, you'll be able to share not just its beauty, but its complete history and the love that went into its creation." Catherine opened the folder and was immediately struck by the first photograph, a picture of the bare platinum framework before any stones had been set. Even in this early stage, the elegant lines and graceful proportions were evident. She turned the page to see images of craftsmen carefully setting each stone, their faces concentrated and serious as they worked on what they clearly understood to be a piece of exceptional importance. "These photographs are remarkable," she said, studying an image that showed the detailed process of setting the central sapphire. "You can see the skill and dedication of everyone involved in creating this." "I wanted to document every stage of the process," Charles said. "Partly for historical purposes, but mostly because I knew that someday you would want to understand exactly how this masterpiece came to be." As Catherine continued through the documentation, she found detailed sketches showing alternative design concepts that had been considered and rejected. Some were more traditional, others more modern, but none had the perfect balance of elements that characterized the final design. "You can see here," Charles pointed to one particular sketch. This was an early concept that incorporated more emeralds. "But we ultimately decided that the sapphires created a better connection to the historical pieces we were drawing from." Catherine nodded, appreciating the thoughtfulness that had gone into every design decision. "The final result is perfect. I can't imagine any of these other designs being more beautiful or more meaningful." The jewelers said the same thing, Charles agreed. "There came a point in the process where everyone involved knew we had found exactly the right combination of elements." As she reached the final pages of the documentation, Catherine found something that took her breath away even more than the tiara itself. It was a handwritten letter from Charles, penned in his careful script on official royal stationery. The letter was addressed to her and dated just 1 week earlier. "You wrote me a letter?" she asked, looking up at him with surprise. "I wanted you to have something in my own words," he explained, "something that explained not just the technical details of this gift, but what it means to me personally to be able to give it to you." Catherine began to read the letter, and, within the first few lines, tears were streaming down her face. Charles had written eloquently about watching her grow into her role, about the pride he felt in her accomplishments, and about the deep affection he had developed for her as a person beyond her role as his daughter-in-law. "You become like a daughter to me," the letter read in part, "and I find myself wanting to protect and celebrate you in the way I would my own child. This tiara represents not just my appreciation for what you've contributed to our family, but my hopes and dreams for your future as you continue to grow into the remarkable woman and future queen I know you're destined to become." By the time Catherine finished reading, she was crying openly, no longer concerned about maintaining royal composure. The emotional weight of Charles's words, combined with the extraordinary gift and the obvious love behind it, had overwhelmed her usual reserve. "Charles," she said through her tears, this means even more to me than the tiara, beautiful as it is. To know that you see me as a daughter, that you're proud of me, it's everything I could have hoped for when I married into this family." Charles moved to embrace her gently, mindful of the precious tiara she still wore. "My dear girl," he said softly, "you've exceeded every hope I could have had for the woman my son would choose to spend his life with. You've brought such light and love into our family." As they held each other in that elegant room, surrounded by centuries of royal history and tradition, both understood that they were creating a new chapter in that ongoing story, a chapter defined by love, acceptance, and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. Several hours had passed since Catherine first laid eyes on the magnificent tiara, and she found herself still wearing it as she and Charles shared lunch in the private dining room adjacent to the blue drawing room. She had initially suggested removing it, feeling self-conscious about wearing such an extraordinary piece during a casual meal, but Charles had insisted she keep it on. "I want to get used to seeing you wear it," he had said with a warm smile. "Besides, I suspect this won't be the last time you'll need to eat while wearing a tiara. It's good practice for state dinners." Their conversation during lunch had been wonderfully relaxed, touching on everything from the children's upcoming school activities to Charles's latest environmental initiatives. Catherine found herself feeling more comfortable with the weight and presence of the tiara as time went on, and she began to understand how such pieces became natural extensions of royal identity. "I've been thinking about when I should wear it publicly for the first time," Catherine said as they finished their meal. "Such a significant piece deserves an equally significant occasion." Charles nodded thoughtfully. "I've actually given that considerable thought as well. There are several upcoming events that would be appropriate, but I believe the decision should ultimately be yours. This tiara is now part of your personal collection within the royal jewels, and when you choose to debut it should reflect your own instincts about timing and appropriateness. Catherine appreciated his deference to her judgment on this matter. One of the things she had always valued about Charles was his understanding of when to offer guidance and when to trust her own developing instincts about royal protocol and public appearances. The state visit next month might be perfect, she mused. It's formal enough to warrant such a spectacular piece, but not so politically sensitive that the jewelry would overshadow the diplomatic purpose of the event. An excellent choice, Charles agreed. And it would give the press and public their first opportunity to see the tiara properly photographed and documented. I think people will be as fascinated by its history as they are by its beauty. As they talked about the practical aspects of debuting the tiara, Catherine realized how much thought would need to go into that first public appearance. The dress would need to complement the piece without competing with it, her hair would need to be styled to show the tiara to its best advantage, and the overall look would need to strike the right balance between accessible and appropriately regal. I should probably consult with the palace stylists well in advance, Catherine said. A piece this significant deserves careful planning to ensure everything works together perfectly. Absolutely, Charles agreed. But I have complete confidence in your judgment about such matters. You've never failed to strike exactly the right note with your public appearances. Their lunch was interrupted by a gentle knock on the door, followed by the entrance of a member of the household staff carrying a silver tray with an ornate envelope. Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty, the staff member said with a respectful bow, but this message arrived marked as urgent for the Princess of Wales. Catherine accepted the envelope with curiosity, noting the official royal seal and her formal title written in elegant script. As she opened it, her face broke into a delighted smile. It's from William, she announced to Charles. He says he's heard rumors about a certain surprise being revealed today, and he's requesting permission to bring the children by for tea so they can see their mother looking particularly radiant. Charles laughed heartily at his son's diplomatic language. I think our secret may not have been quite as well kept as we hoped. But, yes, by all means, let's have the children come for tea. I'm eager to see their reactions to your new tiara. Catherine quickly penned a response to William's note, inviting the family to join them within the hour. As she wrote, she felt a flutter of excitement at the prospect of sharing this moment with her children. George, Charlotte, and Louis had always been interested in the more glamorous aspects of royal life, and she knew they would be fascinated by the story behind this extraordinary piece. Do you think they'll understand the significance of it? Catherine asked Charles as she sealed her response. Children have a wonderful way of recognizing when something is special, even if they don't fully grasp all the historical and emotional complexities, Charles replied. I think they'll be impressed by its beauty and excited that their mother has received such a magnificent gift. While they waited for the family to arrive, Charles shared more stories about the individual stones in the tiara and their previous owners. Catherine was particularly moved to learn that one of the smaller diamonds had once been part of a piece worn by Princess Diana, William's mother. I thought it was important to include that connection, Charles explained gently. Diana will always be part of William's story and, by extension, part of your children's heritage. Having a piece of her jewelry incorporated into your tiara seemed like a way to honor her memory while celebrating your own place in the family. Catherine touched the tiara gently, thinking about the woman whose memory still influenced so much of royal life and family dynamics. That means more to me than you know, she said softly. I've always felt a responsibility to honor her memory while being true to my own identity. Including a piece of her jewelry in this tiara feels like a perfect symbol of that balance. The sound of children's voices in the corridor announced the arrival of William and the three little Wales children. Catherine could hear Charlotte's excited chatter and Louis's delighted laughter as they approached the dining room. Her heart swelled with anticipation at sharing this special moment with her family. William entered first, his face breaking into a radiant smile as he saw Catherine wearing the tiara. Even though he had seen the piece before today, witnessing his wife actually wearing it clearly moved him deeply. He crossed the room quickly to embrace her, whispering, "You look absolutely magnificent," in her ear. The children followed close behind, and their reactions were everything Catherine could have hoped for. Charlotte gasped audibly and clapped her hands together, while George stood perfectly still for a moment, clearly awed by the sight of his mother transformed by such an extraordinary piece of jewelry. Little Louis, true to his irrepressible nature, immediately announced, "Mummy, you look like a real princess." "I am a real princess, darling," Catherine laughed, kneeling down carefully to embrace her youngest son. "But this very special crown makes me feel extra princess-like." Charlotte approached more slowly, her eyes wide with fascination. "Mummy, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Are those real diamonds?" "They are indeed real diamonds," Charles answered, clearly delighted by his granddaughter's interest. "And sapphires and emeralds and pearls. Each one has a story, and now they're all part of a new story about your mother." George, ever the thoughtful eldest child, studied the tiara with serious concentration. "It looks very old but also very new," he observed with the wisdom that often surprised adults. "Like it's made from old things but created just for you." "That's exactly right, George," Catherine said, impressed as always by her son's perceptive observations. "Grandpa Charles had it made specially for me, using precious stones from other pieces that have been in the family for many years." The children spent the next hour examining the tiara in detail, asking questions about each stone and listening intently as Charles shared age-appropriate versions of the historical stories behind various elements. Catherine was touched by how seriously they took this moment, understanding instinctively that they were witnessing something significant in their family's story. "Will you wear it when you're queen?" Charlotte asked, her voice filled with the particular gravity children bring to questions about the distant future. Catherine exchanged a meaningful glance with William and Charles before answering. "Someday, when Daddy becomes king and I become queen, this tiara will be one of the special pieces I can choose to wear on important occasions. But that won't be for many, many years. And when I'm grown up, will I get to wear it too?" Charlotte continued, her imagination clearly captured by the possibilities. "Perhaps someday," Catherine said gently. "But first you'll need to grow up and decide what kind of life you want to live. Royal jewelry is beautiful, but it comes with important responsibilities too." As the afternoon progressed, the family settled into comfortable conversation about the tiara and what it represented. The children gradually became less fascinated by the sparkly stones and more interested in the stories behind them, asking about Queen Victoria and Queen Mary and the other royal women who had worn these jewels before. "I think what I love most about this gift," Catherine said as the day drew toward evening, "is how it connects past and future. These stones have seen so much history, and now they'll be part of our family's story going forward." William nodded, watching their children continue to examine the tiara with fascination. "It's the perfect symbol of continuity and change working together. Just like the monarchy itself." Charles, who had been quietly observing the family interactions throughout the afternoon, felt a deep satisfaction watching his son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren bond over this special moment. The tiara had served its intended purpose not just as a beautiful gift, but as a symbol of belonging, tradition, and the enduring strength of family love. As the sun began to set through the tall windows of Windsor Castle, casting a golden glow across the room, Catherine realized that this day had given her something even more precious than the magnificent tiara. It had given her a moment of perfect clarity about her place in this extraordinary family and the bright future that awaited them all. The tiara, nestled once again in its silk-lined box as evening approached, seemed to gleam with promise, a symbol of love given and received, of traditions honored and futures embraced, and of a family bound together by something far more valuable than any precious stone, the unbreakable bonds of genuine affection and mutual respect.